It's Joey with Imzz Elite. We're back in the shop today. We have a brand new 22 Softail Street Bob. This customer put 8 miles on this thing and brought it to the best shop in town so we could spice it up. We threw a couple things on it. Now we're gonna go through and throw a lay down license plate frame with the integrated LED light on it. So let's get into it. To get started, we're gonna pull this seat off because we're gonna need to get to the wires underneath the seat. We're gonna go ahead and unplug this plug right here. This is gonna be your plug for your license plate light. Pull up on the tab and then push down on it. Now we got no power going, so we don't have to worry about getting shocked back here. We're gonna go ahead and clip these zip ties, but I don't like to clip the actual buckle off. Just clip the zip tie, I'll show you. We'll come through with flush cuts. Cut these off pretty clean right here. Now we'll still be able to reuse the buckles to put some new zip ties on. So go ahead and undo this left blinker too. And then we're going to go ahead and take off these strut bolts. And we'll pull this whole strut off the side. Still running stock hardware. The T45 is going to get that off. Now that they're broken loose, before you get them all the way out, there's also one more bolt up inside of here. That's kind of difficult to see. It's another T45. It may be easier to get the bike up on a jack and droop the back wheel out a little bit if you need to, because you need some clearance in here. I have a wrench that'll fit in there, but not everybody has all these specialty tools, so it may be easier to just pull both of your strut. You know what? Let's do that. Most of you at home are going to be able to do this a little bit easier. Same T45. We can go through and break these strut bolts loose. Now we want to support the fender. Go ahead and just pull these all the way out. It's easiest to get them all to where they're about hand tight. Remember to stay supporting the fender the whole time. Otherwise you drop it. Oh, on the inside here you can see that T45. Now we can pull this off, set that on the side. And you got this fender strap in here, gonna fall out. Set this down on a blanket or somewhere that's at least padded. Now we're gonna have to go in with the T40 and we'll break this tail light loose. You'll want a little bit of a workspace for this part. So now we're gonna have to undo all these little tape cable retainers. The blinker one you'll be able to pull right through. You'll get that out of your way. Now this one, you don't have to worry about de-pinning. You can if you want to, but not everybody has the tools to de-pin these connectors. So we'll just leave that on. We're gonna go ahead and pull it out of this mount here carefully. It's just wedged in there, as you can see, and sometimes they throw a little glue. So now we got that free. T20 will open this little side door up. So now that we got the actual light assembly out of it after we remove those two screws, we can get to this section of wire that doesn't have any sheathing. We don't have to worry about stripping this back at all. We can just clip this off right at the light, and then we're gonna go ahead and reuse these two wires. Cut as close to the base of that light as we can so we get as much of that wire. Now we're gonna go ahead and strip these back. Just a basic pair of strippers is all you need. So now we got that set up. We can start getting our wire for our LED frame set up. One thing I definitely like to do is go through and add at least a little bit more heat shrink, but I may not need to on this one. We'll see how it's going to reach. We may have enough wire here between the two of these, but I think I'm going to add probably another 3 or 4 inches to it. We'll go ahead and slide a little extra heat shrink on here while everything's still full length. Sometimes it helps to just snip those off. The flush cuts, especially when you have so much extra wire, so you don't have to deal with those. Get it right to where it overlaps the one they give you. Now I already know I'm not going to need all of this, so I'm just going to save myself the hassle. I'm going to go ahead and snip it probably like another 4 or 5 inches past that, and it may even get shortened up from there. We got to get our fender back on the bike so we can go ahead and lay out where we want it positioned on there. Alright, so while we only have one strut on here, this will be pretty easy. We'll be able to take 2 of these and we'll hang it just by one side for a second. Now, so that this doesn't sag, you gotta go through and run these all the way in. Now that'll at least hold it enough in place so we can get some tape on here, and we'll get a little layout going on. You can just kind of like general area where you know it's gonna be, so we can get some layout without marking up the paint. That way we can sort of eyeball where we want it to lie. It's probably about right. So I'll get have some tape with measurements on it so we can get it centered up, at least as close as the eye can tell. That way everything looks right. Looking like when you just kind of side it off of the seat bolt, because that's what your eye's naturally going to catch off center. About where I thought, right about 4.5 on our 4.5 mark, maybe 4 5/8. That'll at least give me a cross section that I can try to keep everything square. So we can keep it centered on our strip of tape here, but even that's a little off, so we'll probably, it's all just sort of a calibrated eyeball here, and I'm keeping my bottom edge in line with my tape in the center. Since it's sort of just a calibrated eyeball, everything's mainly just a loose reference, so you don't start getting way off center. You have a couple things, the edges of this are about the same width as the fender, so you always can use that to sort of double check, make sure you're not hanging off of one side. But definitely, since you're sighting off the center, having that tape is a plus. Once I've got it where it looks like I'm comfortable with it, go ahead and mark my 4 holes. Since this is going to have the LED in it, we're going to run a wire through the center. Again, just sort of a calibrated eyeball here. I just try my best to sight the center of those holes we marked. And luckily the center of this one's right across that 2-inch mark. So I'll make a little cross reference down the center this way. Now I have, so we're gonna go ahead and center punch those, and then I'll pull the tape and I'll have all my center punches. If you don't have an automatic center punch, I would definitely recommend running out to at least Home Depot or Harbor Freight and getting like the click style automatic center punch. If you're gonna do this yourself, it's kind of a necessary tool because it's not exactly a position where you can hit it with a hammer and punch without putting a big dent or just putting way too much flex on that fender. So we'll go ahead and peel all the tape. Now the reason I'm gonna peel the tape is because sometimes when you drill over tape, you always get that one chip that hooks under the tape and will just spin, and it's being held down by the tape, so it just grinds up the paint underneath. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off now that we're not laying anything on there anymore, and I can go ahead and drill these out. Just a 1/16 little pilot bit. You'll want to keep the tips of the drill bits clean so you don't drag chips across your paint. Now you can see them a little better. I'm going to get a little bit of tape on here on the tip of this drill bit. That way we make sure we don't punch all the way through and slam the chuck right into the fender. So easiest way to do that is just make sure you have enough of that drill bit sticking out to go all the way through. We'll go ahead and roll just a little bit of tape over the outside. That way it gives it sort of a stop so it can't slam into the chuck. Make sure you support this fender because we only have one strut. Keep those chips clear also. Now we've got our pilot holes. We're gonna go through with the 17/64, just one size over a quarter. Make sure all our quarter bolts go in there real easily. And we're gonna punch all those out. Same thing, we're gonna throw a little masking tape stop on there. And also use that to make sure you don't punch all the way through and hit your tire. It's a little bit of a waste of tape, but tape's a lot cheaper than tires. One thing that's important to do is go through here and get rid of any burrs that are hanging off the backside. If you can't drag your hand across it without cutting yourself, you need to clean it up. I'm going to get a little chamfer bit and clean this outside up. Alright, so now we got that on there, we can go ahead and get our actual mount bolted down. Before we get started, we want to throw a little bit of anti-seize on these 3 stainless bolts. Most of these lay-down plate mounts come with stainless hardware, so I usually just throw one in there, throw the rubber backing on there, and position the one. Throw a nut on there. We can pop our other 2 in. So go ahead and tighten this top one. Just snug. Don't torque it down yet, that'll give you the ability to get that in line with the bottom edge of the fender. Go ahead and get them all just to snug. Alright, now they're all snug. We'll double check it. Any little tweaks. As long as it's good, then we'll finish throwing it on. Okay, so now that we got our base mounted, we got to go through, get our plate frame on there, and run our wire through. Once you've gotten to this point, you need to go ahead and take this license plate frame assembly, pull your blinker out of it. You may have to de-pin the connector on the end. Most likely you will. These ones aren't too bad, but there's a trick to this. So let me grab a couple things, I'll show you. Alright, so you'll need a little pick, something like that. Even a bent paper clip will probably do it. And then you'll need the other end of a paper clip or this tool, just a straight pick basically. No sharp end, just essentially stem. So we're going to take the pick, pop this little door open here on the side. If you see, you can't open this door all the way because now it's caught up here. We got this hinge. You have to go through. And now you need to take this razor blade and actually carefully shave the hinge off the back side of this little body here. Kind of a tricky task. Now that we shave the back of it off, take the door and slide it up. We'll take the pick, pull the little rubber seal out. Now I want to take, this part's where it gets a little tricky. You have to push on the little tab right here on the back. Works a little better with this. And then pull on the wire at the same time. So this is a little bit of a chore. If you don't have a good memory, I would suggest taking a photo of the order these were in. The door will keep them in order, but you'll have to remember what order they went in the connector. Otherwise, you'll flip it around the other way. So now that we got the connector off, pull that right through. Set this on a rag so we don't ruin it. Now we're gonna have to go through and we're gonna chop this arm off. Because if you look, this spacer here that comes with the left side blinker is physically shorter than the right side. It's made up by the thickness of that mount. So your bolt will end up short and your blinker will end up short on one side. You'll end up with a little bit different, it'll look a little off. So we're gonna shave this off and clean it up, and then we'll put it back on without all of this. Now we're gonna go over to the bandsaw, and I'll carefully cut that off, and then we'll shave it up so it looks nice and clean. Now while that's drying, I want to go ahead and throw our strut back up here, and we're going to mark a hole for where this wire needs to feed through the left side of this fender. Run this back down for now. So that we get an accurate location, we're going to run those all the way in. Take our Sharpie. Here's our window. We can go ahead. Let's make a little circle. I'm going to go ahead and pull that strut back off real quick. ahead and get our pilot bit again. Automatic center punch. Go ahead and center punch that. Alright, now we're going to go in with the step bit, and I've already marked with the Sharpie my 7/16 step. We're going to go ahead and run that all the way up to there, and I'll show you why in a second. Take a small little rubber grommet. (7/16) grommet. Pop that right in there. That way we can run that wire through that hole. We don't have to worry about it rubbing on the fender and shorting out the tail light. So, as you can see, we're going to have to run that wire through, and then we'll get it all hemmed up on the outside here. So now we're going to go back through, put the strut back on, get the blinker put back on, and feed the wire through. And then we're going to go ahead and get these wires hooked up, and we'll be ready to throw the plate in and rock and roll. Reinstall our bolt. Put our connector back on. Your strut's ready to go back on. Fish this wire through the grommet. Pop a fender strap in. Go ahead and tighten everything down. Now, all that's left is to button this up. One thing to figure out real quick, I'm going to go ahead and keep these separate. I'm gonna throw a test light on here. Then we're gonna figure out which one's power and which one's ground so we can connect them accordingly. White's obviously gonna be power, black's gonna be our ground. So we're not getting hot there. Okay, so there's our hot wire. Just to make sure again. We got ground and hot. So we're gonna go ahead. This bent one's the ground, right? Mark the ground. Just a little piece of tape. Now we can strip these back real quick. This is a super fine wire. Alright, so now we got our wires exposed. We're gonna go ahead and twist those up. Actually, I could shorten those up some and not have so much slack. Doesn't make any sense to have all this excess wire, so we'll just go ahead and trim it. Leave it a little long. Some of these real fine wires are too small for strippers. God damn it. If you're not careful, you end up taking a couple of strands of wire with it. Once you get all these wires all twisted up, a little more firm, they're gonna be a little easier to solder or butt connect. I'm gonna solder these real quick. It's just 2 wires. Take some heat shrink, pre-cut you some pieces for your 2 wires you're about to solder. You'll want to pre-slide those on. Whenever I'm doing a solder joint, I like to wrap them around each other and then kind of interlock them. Now while we have it set up for soldering, as long as you keep those separate, we can test our LED and make sure everything's hooked up right. See, we got our plate illumination. Now we'll go through and solder those real quick. Now we got our heat shrink pushed up over our solder joints. What we gotta do is go through and shrink them real quick. Now we can pull all this excess through the side here. And so that it's not pulled super taut. Usually what I do is I leave a little bit of slack down here, and I go ahead and I grab one of these little zip tie bases, little square base. You can pick those up Home Depot, a couple places. Just peel that off the back. Now right about where it goes in, maybe about 1 inch off of where it goes in through the fender, Just stick that on the side there. Give it a good press for a second. And then we can run this wire up along the side here. Kind of tricky sometimes to get these zip ties lined up. Now you don't have to worry about snagging it on your tire. Go up in there with some flush cuts. Cut it off clean. Now we can go back through with new zip ties. We get all this hooked back up in here. We'll run new zip ties through all these buckles that we left in place. Now we're going to go ahead and run these new zip ties through. You can run all 3 of them if you want. See, it still functions. Get the seat thrown back on here. We'll get the plate installed in there, and this guy's gonna be ready to rip, get down the road.